Earth, the in bulk, the most abundant is iron. Okay, so like that, this part you should know. So it is very important in this part. Okay. Now, in these, so this is sort of like which questions which will be very high likelihood. Now, this anything can be asked in the exam. Okay, radioactivity and age of Earth, this is also asked. So volcanoes also usually they asked in the exams. Okay, so this they will not ask both volcanoes and earthquakes. Okay, so one question will come from this part. Okay, one question will come from this part. Okay, more like so effects of earthquakes. So it's what is more likely. Okay, one fixed question which is there from the general geology part is types of plate boundaries. It is like 80% of the time this question is asked. Okay, sometimes, so this will be a 20 mark question or 15 mark. Okay, but sometimes they can ask you, if they're not asking this in 20 marks, they can ask you about this island arc, deep sea trenches. So these, if they give you individual island arc, deep sea trenches, mid-oceanic ridges, so that will be a 10 mark question. Okay, so they can sometimes ask you differentiate between island arc and volcanic arc. That question has come in the past. So those kind of questions are usually 10 mark question. But if they ask you about plate types of plate boundaries, then it will be a 20 mark question. Okay. All right. Then this continental drift evidences mechanics. This question has also been asked. Basically, sea floor spreading. So again, this will be sort of like a single question. One question will be asked. Plate tectonics, type of plate boundaries we have already studied. And again, isostasy, orogeny, aporogeny. This question can also be asked. And basically here, all these topics that you see are important, but I'm telling you like the question that is asked. But the most important are meteorites. Top three, if I have to choose, meteorites, internal structure of Earth, and this plate tectonics. And once you study type of plate boundaries, then these are automatically covered. Okay, and yes, this one actually four. So these are the main topics. But yes, Mayank sir, you have anything to add?
No, I think you have covered everything, right? These are the three like most commonly repeated topic, right? And they can even ask you. They generally ask you. They're asking questions like, "What is earthquake? What is volcano?" So, right, we
Yeah,
all know what is earthquake, what is volcano, but it is important that we make it a little bit technical, right? You can use in volcano, you can use some of your knowledge of igneous petrology, right? Like even just writing the names like basalt and the name of the few rocks, volcanic rocks, right? So it will give you better marks and just prepare better diagrams like sir said. So like paper one is highly presentable driven, and people like almost everyone everyone who is writing geology, he or she will score in excess of 90 marks out of 200 in paper one. And it is because it is pretty simple. So just make better diagrams, you will be able to score maybe sometimes like 120, 130 also, right, in paper one.
yeah. So Mayank sir, maybe you can take for geomorphology here some important things.
Okay, like so, like in that PDF also, I mentioned that in geomorphology, I think two things are most important. One thing is like they are asking some basic concepts in geomorphology, right? So like in this syllabus, there are three topics. The first topic is basic concepts of geomorphology. Another topic is about this land slopes and drainage, and the third topic is morphology and its relation to structure and lithology, right? So like they are clubbing these three topics and they will ask you some basic concepts, right? Ki how landforms are dependent on structure, how landforms are dependent on rock type and other structural features, right? So if you are from geography background or like you must have heard Thornbury's principle. So that is the first thing. This we have covered in handwritten notes also. So you can read that. So that is one thing important. In that you just need to have in those principles you just need to give good examples, right? There is not much scope of diagram, good example. And the second thing which they are asking in geomorphology is they are directly asking landforms. So like there are five landforms they keep asking. There is coastal, glacial, landforms, right? So in landforms there are three types of question. One, they will ask you about write a short note on coastal landforms. Second is they will ask on depositional coastal landform, or the third is erosional coastal landform, right? So this they can do with all the five, but I think coastal landforms are the most important landforms. They are most commonly repeated in IFS, right? It is also because these coastal landforms are also mentioned in environmental geology. right? They serve you in geomorphology also, and paper 2 environmental geology also. So prepare them very well. Just make maybe two three small diagrams for these landforms, right? Suppose there are fluvial landforms. Sometimes they will mention that, write note on four depositional and four erosional landforms. This they asked last year itself, right? For fluvial purpose. So just prepare basic diagram. You can use whatever content you have from GC Leong also, and so just practice these diagrams. They will give you a lot of marks in this chapter, geomorphology part.
Yes. And for remote sensing again, okay. So this question, I'm going through this global positioning system, okay. So this is like one of the favorite topics. So sometimes they will ask you components. This year, for example, in civil services, they asked about components of global positioning system. They can ask you its applications part is very important.
Hmm.
And in applications part, you'll see these things: remote sensing, okay. So aerial photographs, okay, and then applications of remote sensing. So it should be somewhere, okay. Satellites, applications of remote sensing in geology, okay. So this application part is covered in three topics. So one question usually they will either as part of another question. So somehow they are going to cover this one, okay. Aerial photographs, their merits, limitations, okay, or their applications. Generally in these three questions there is a lot of overlap, okay. So if you write these answers even from your general knowledge, okay, they are for example used to monitor in disaster management, flood management, you'll use them. So some of the applications are pretty broad and there is a lot of overlap, so you can write basically sort of like very similar answer in all those. They can be used in mineral prospecting, especially if you're talking about remote sensing engineers. So you have gone through these in the notes, so just revise this part, okay. So applications part, just make keyword notes which you can remember in the exam, that part is going to come. So this GIS, okay. So and then this GIS applications is also, so this also, actually the third one was this also has similar applications, okay. So all these have roughly similar applications. Now this part, they sometimes Indian remote sensing satellites, okay. So in this one, sometimes they ask you about IRS historical developments, okay, Indian remote sensing satellite series. In the past, they have also asked about Cartosat. So these two are the most important ones, okay. So IRS and Cartosat, RaySat they can ask sometime, but these two at least the latest one, and just few of the historical developments. There is a pattern here, okay. It is not random. So initially, for example, you had two bands or three bands you had, then the number of bands increased, okay. So two are invisible, or one will be in infrared, then they keep adding bands to that based on those atmospheric windows that you have. So it will help you revise those atmospheric windows also. Atmospheric windows question is very standard in the exam, okay. So link this part with atmospheric windows, okay. And in the infrared region, and both your answers will be prepared, okay. So and just a few historical developments: when was the first IRS satellite launched, okay, how many have been launched, these few basic things you revise. And this is kind of again a GK thing also, okay. So here the only thing that you may not study in as part of general studies is the sensor characteristic, basically what type of sensor is there. So you would have heard this name LIS, okay. So just remember this name, okay. This sensor is used in IRS, and what is its bandwidth is there, okay. So just revise this basic parts in this one, okay. So historical part is there, and then sensor characteristic. So this list basically is active in which, again as I said, this sensor characteristic and atmospheric window you can link and revise both concepts together, okay. All right. The electromagnetic spectrum is very easy. Okay. So from this electromagnetic spectrum only, they can ask you atmospheric windows. Okay. Uh, so you revise this part. Okay. So this is basic science. Orbiting satellites and sensor systems. I think this also you would have studied a little bit as part of general studies, that what type of orbits you have. You have polar orbits, equatorial orbit, geostationary, geosynchronous. So just revise those orbits as well. And this sensor system part which is there, okay. So in this sensor system part, okay, so the three main important sensors are push. The two most are actually push broom, which is also called line scanner, and whisk broom. Okay, so I gave you example that push whisk broom is like jhadu. Okay, you clean your house with jhadu. Okay, push broom is like mop. So it is the broom which you push. So it is actually in a line. It will clean. Okay, that will have oscillatory motion. So you revise these two. There is a framing camera as well. Okay, but it shouldn't take like more than now 5-10 minutes to revise these parts. Okay, so if you see the diagrams and if you remember it this way, you'll be able to answer this. Okay, uh, prepare a little bit about basic which is there in your satellite data products, for example, what you can get. And aerial photographs is given good in NCRT. So aerial photographs, the question, let me highlight this. Okay, so this they asked in the civil services this year. Okay, aerial photographs, one question usually is there in the exam. Okay, so a- aerial photographs, and again limitations also of remote sensing aerial photographs, okay, is roughly similar. Okay, you cannot, it is from far away, you cannot touch and see, you don't know what is the actual truth, like that. Okay, so for aerial photographs you basically focus on applications. Okay, limitations. And one thing is photo interpretation, elements of photo interpretation. Okay, so this part, in this part what do they ask is, so all these very simple things which you observe in a photo, such tone, color, contrast. Okay, so these things are there, geometry, shape. Okay, so just revise these parts. Okay, even if you remember headings, you have enough, I would say, knowledge that if you write anything inside it now, you will get marks. That much you know, like what to write in shape. Okay, so this just revise these elements of photo interpretation part, that is important. Okay, so anything you have to add, Mayank sir, here?
No, I think Sir has covered. Like,
Okay.
there are two important topics more. One is about spectral signature of soil, water, and vegetation. Right.
Oh
So
yes, yes,
they
yes,
often ask this question, and one is atmospheric window. Right. So these two questions are very much repeated. I've also provide we
yes.
have provided short notes of this remote sensing part in the Telegram group also. So like if you have not somehow prepared this one remote sensing, so at least ratify that part. Itna utna
Spectral signature, just at least these through, they are very simple. Okay,
simple.
so just remember this. For example, this will be for vegetation. Okay, and you don't have to be very exact. Roughly,
Yes.
you should be there that this is the visible part, this is the near infrared part, these are the water absorption bands. Okay, so soil, I think, is also a little bit like this. Okay, and water is very simple. Water is just like this. It absorbs anything, everything. So how you remember this? You have studied greenhouse effect. Okay, where everyone says that if ice sheets melt, they will not reflect the radiation, everything will be absorbed. Okay, so water basically absorbs almost all of the infrared radiation. Okay, so it's basically, if this is reflectance, okay, on this side spectral reflectance, so for water it will be very small. This small peak that you see here is around bluish color, so water appears a little bit bluish.
Bluish.
So like that you can remember, it's not a very difficult topic. You saw in just like few seconds I could draw all these three diagrams. Okay, and then that atmospheric windows also, you try to use your some part general knowledge. So for example, ultraviolet rays are blocked by ozone. Visible light you can see. Okay, so it's easy to see that. Otherwise, if there was no atmospheric window there, our eyes will not work, we will not be able to see anything. And then in infrared also, far infrared, something is blocked. Okay, because earth blocks those greenhouse gases of long wave radiation. And finally here, because TV communication is going on, so microwaves, okay, and radio waves. Okay, that is how we send signals. Okay, that is how we our Wi-Fi works. So there should be an atmospheric window over there. So if you try to link it with these things, you'll be able to answer this part as well. Okay. Okay. Now to the difficult topic. Okay, so paleontology is a little bit difficult. So you can strategize in this one when you're revising. Okay. So usually the questions that you will get, okay, one question will be from the fundamentals part. Okay. So this is the fundamentals. All these are fundamentals here that you see in this part.
Structural, I think is.
Structural. Okay. Oh yes. Sorry about that. I thought this is done. Okay. So yes, first let's go through structural. Okay. Principles of geological mapping and map reading. This question sometimes they directly ask. Okay, what are principles of geological mapping? Okay, so one thing is like you have to be clear is like mapping versus map. Okay, so many people confuse between this part. They will sometimes write about mapping, sometimes they may write about map. Okay, but the thing is, when it comes to map, okay, so your answer will start what is map? Map is, for example, a 2D projection of 3D world. Okay, so 3D world you'll project onto 2D, and you write a little bit about that. You have topography map, you can write types of maps which are there. Okay, and geological mapping, which is actually more commonly asked in the exam, they can ask you geological mapping is basically when you go out in the field, you carry out geological mapping. So there are certain stages to it. It is a little bit similar to what you will carry out in basically mineral prospecting stages as well, a little bit, not too much. So, but it will involve planning, field equipment, okay, deciding what traverse you have to take, means which path you have to take in the field, okay. So those basic things are there, which you go, which you study, okay. So that answer you prepare standard answer for this one. Then you have basically map reading, okay. Usually they don't ask many difficult questions from it in structural geology, for example, interpretation of topographic maps and etc. Okay, but in Prajesh Jaina's notes, this part is given pretty decently. Okay, so where what basically for the hill, this topographic map will be there. For a valley, you will have V shape. So these basic two are two concepts of topography you should know. Okay, so and this valley V points upstream like this. Okay, so just read from PJ's notes. Projection diagram. Okay, so you have studied, I think, them pretty decently. You would know already. I don't think you even need to revise them because they're same in a little bit different in there in mineralogy versus in structural. So one question can come from this one. Okay, so either from mineralogy or from structural geology. Okay, all right. So this is pretty standard asked. Stress, strain, ellipsoid. So they can ask you stress ellipsoid or strain ellipsoid. Okay. So one question can be asked from this part. This is a very often repeated question. So I will highlight this in red. So this is often repeated question. Okay. This is not always repeated, but it does appear in the exam. Okay, directly. Stress strain relation. So those diagrams of stress and strain are there. Okay, so this kind of diagram you would have seen. So for example, this one, sometimes a brittle material will break. This is the plastic behavior, right? Plastic material will, this is the elastic behavior. So plastic material will just have behavior like this. Okay. So these stress strain relationship, these diagrams you have to revise, just revise this from PJ's notes or from your own notes. Stress strain markers in deformed rocks. Again, for you, for this, I provided the notes. Okay. So I think from this part, they will ask one question. Okay. This one, behavior of minerals and rocks under deformation conditions. Okay. Usually they don't ask very often, but sometimes it's a little bit similar to what you studied in metamorphic, in dynamic metamorphism. Okay. So here sometimes they can ask you about crystallization. Okay, so if this part, okay, you can go through those previous year solutions also. So once or twice, if they've asked about recrystallization, recovery, etc., those are advanced topics. They are not very often repeated, but if they ask, you can, if you want, you can revise from that part. But it's not that important. The most important part here is again after stress strain ellipsoid, and this part is the folds and faults part. So there will definitely 100% be a question from this part. And now these are not standalone topics. Fold is a vast topic, so you basically should know classifications of fold. Ramsay's classification and Flutie's classification are most important. Okay, so just revise from the slides. Similarly for faults, okay, so that is also very important.
So I have a
Okay,
question.
so one question. Anything to add, answer? Yes, Ankit.
Yeah, sir, if they don't mention like any particular classification and they simply ask about the classification of folds, so should we mention in brief both Flutie and Ramsey? And same question with faults. If they don't mention anything like right simple on classification of fault, so should we just mention the Anderson classification and just move on?
Anderson, first of all, is not classification, it is theory, okay? So, which explains classification, normal, reverse, okay? So, write
Okay.
that. Normal, that is called the genetic classification. Normal, reverse, strike, slip, okay? So, mention that. Yeah, you are correct. Basically, the more you can write headings, okay, and don't go into drawing like very nice single pictures, but very easily you draw like, okay, this is a normal fault, reverse fault, okay, like this. Even these diagram, and then you can expand it, okay. Strike slip fault, dextral, sinistral, okay. So you can go in that way, and I've given you that flow chart also in the notes, so that is one thing that you can do. But if they've asked 20 marks, then you have another page to fill. Then you can go through, for example, some other classifications are given in terms of faults. So for example, you may have a listric fault like this, which is curved, okay. So you can start to mention these additional things as well, okay. If they ask you, usually it doesn't happen very often. They will usually ask you about, for example, genetic classification or classification based on relative motion. Relative motion is also like genetic classification only, okay. So like that you mentioned, and that flow chart is there in your notes, so please draw that flow chart as well. So for example, you can have dip slip and strike slip. Okay, and this dip slip is divided into normal and reverse, and this is dextral and sinistral. And here then you can draw those diagrams to show basically, and then you can say footwall moves up. So like this, it will take less time also, and you basically are telling you, most people they directly write this. Okay, they will skip this part. Okay, so it sort of like provides you an advantage over there. Okay, so this is way, and then you can write like other types of faults that you have studied. Okay,
Okay, sir.
okay, try to cover a lot of parts. Okay, so don't try to, if it is taking too much time, don't think that you will draw just one very nice diagram of a fault in 3D, and then you will start shading it. If you have time, you can do those. And if, let's say, the question does not ask for many diagrams, but if many diagrams have to be drawn, then you focus on number of diagrams rather than quality. Okay. Anything to add, Mayank sir?
No, I think like he also asked about fold. So like sir said कि in generally fault they don't ask कि classification of fault, वो यही पूछेंगे write note on types of fault. So सर ने जो diagram बनाया make that right. उसके बाद you can write, अगर if you remember you can write curvilinear fault, elliptic fault, all those. But इतना most है. And in fold generally they either ask you Ramsey classification या फिर वो classification on the basis of dip isogon इस तरह करके पूछेंगे. फ्लूटी का भी इधर दे विल आस्क डायरेक्टली फ्लूटी का, और दे विल गिव सम एक्चुअल प्लेन के हिसाब से उस तरह पूछेंगे. तो यू शुड अंडरस्टैंड कि कौन सा क्लासिफिकेशन वो
हाँ,
पूछ रहे हैं, राइट. और अगर वो जनरल पूछते हैं राइट टाइप्स ऑफ फोल्ड, देन यू हैव टू राइट ये क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ फोल्ड है. बट आप बेसिक चीजें भी कभी कभी पूछ लेते हैं, जैसे कि सिमेट्रिकल, असिमेट्रिकल, रिकम्बेंट, ये सब तरह के फॉल्ट, राइट. तो तीन ही तरह के सवाल आते हैं जनरली. लाइक सर सेड फोल्ड में दे विल आस्क इधर डायरेक्टली रैम से और फ्लूटी. उसको कभी कभी वो मास्क इन कर लेंगे, डायरेक्ट नहीं बोलेंगे, उनका क्राइटेरिया पूछ लेंगे. तो दिस इज हाउ दे
this
आस्क.
time in CM, they asked like any 8 or 6 type of those based on closure. Okay. So closure, for example, closure is in which side the fold is closing. If it is closing upwards, it is antiform, synform. Okay. And then you can combine it with old and young, anticlinal antiform, synclinal synform. Okay. So then you can have young, old. So 4 type ko to yahi ho gaye. Then you can have sideways closing, which becomes recumbent fold, which is neutral fold. Neutral fold can be of 2 types. Okay, it can be recumbent or it can be vertical fold. ये देखो, both of them are closing sideways. Okay, so 6 types done. So this is another one. So based on closure, which
Right.
is there.
And
Okay.
a lot of people even from geology background, they left this question, right? It is so basic question, क्योंकि उन्होंने फोल्ड डोमेन, फोल्ड क्लोजर ऐसे टेक्निकल वर्ड लिख रखे थे, विच जनरली वी डोंट स्टडी. तो आपके लिए भी एक लेसन है कि कभी इस तरह पूछ रहे हैं तो यू जस्ट टेक अ डीप ब्रेथ और पूछो कि आपने सोचो कि क्या पढ़ के आए हो, एंड देन अटेम्प्ट इट, राइट? तो ब्लैंक नहीं छोड़ना होता,
Yes.
लाइक अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल
Because
लेट
many
इट.
students they will get confused. They will ask, like in the UPSC question is asked, classify folds based on dip of axial plane and plunge or
Yes,
fold axis, and they'll say what is this? Okay, but you have studied this. This is Flute's classification. That's
yes,
what is there. Flute's classification, on one side you have dip of axial. These are headings only. Okay,
yes.
so you should remember like this. Similarly, as Mayank sir said, for example, in Ramses they can ask you based on dip isogon. They can ask you, okay. So these things, this concept for folds and faults you revise. Okay, so these questions they will definitely ask in the exam. Okay.
So actually, like till now, this is the most important question from structural geology, right? Which whatever we discussed in last 5 7 minutes. And sometime one more question they can ask you, right? Like as a geologist, if you go to a field, right, and then how you will identify whether there is fault, whether there is fold, right? So we say that how criteria for identification of fold or fault in the field. So there are strict direct criteria. It is directly given in Bangalore also, and sir has covered it in class. So you have basic understanding. So prepare that also as a short note. They ask that directly at time.
Yes. Okay, so we are going through paleontology. Okay, so paleontology, you see
And this
this.
one more thing, like in the structural, like there is a topic introduction to spectral fabric, that is the last topic of structural syllabus, right? So that topic is
Yes.
not mentioned in civil services. So it is actually never asked in civil services. In forest, like they have directly asked, they will not ask anything fancy on it. If they ask, like it will be difficult, so right, they will directly copy paste this word petrofabric either in short notes, mostly in short note, and you will have to write. So like sir has covered, it is also not available directly in any book, right? So sir has also given some notes, so at least rectify those headings and prepare for a 8 marker for petrofabric. So like last time they asked petrofabric was in 2017, right? So it has not been asked from last 4 years. So maybe this year they can ask petrofabric directly. So prepare that at least heading of what you will write some content on petrofabric. And like most of the people will not be attempting this question. So it is important you prepare petrofabric, very brief, like half page content. Okay, sir, we can.
Even this thing, for example, most of the people have studied this thing, but they get confused. What is this time relation between crystallization and deformation? By wording, they get confused. Syntectonic, synkinematic, prekinematic, postkinematic. Everyone has studied these parts. Okay. All right. So in paleontology, it is divided into, basically you can divide it into different groups. Okay. One is the fundamentals part. Okay. The next part is the microfossils part. Okay. So this is this part, microfossils. Okay. The second part that is there. The third part is this different fossil groups. Okay. Which is actually, I would say, the most, can be most time consuming and requires most effort. Okay, it's goes all the way through here. Okay, and the last part is this one, evolutionary trends. Okay, and actually I will just cover this one together, and the last part will be this Shivalik fauna, Gondwana flora. Okay, so it's actually one, two, three, four, and five parts within paleontology. Okay, so usually they will not ask two questions from one part. Okay, how many questions will come in one exam, Mayank sir? Three or four?
Yes, I
Four
think
from
like there will be one question each. Like there will be one question in compulsory
yeah,
and one each. So there will be four questions. Sometimes
four,
there
four,
might be
four.
two questions in compulsory. So there might be five, but mostly four.
Yeah, so you prepare in that part. If you're going to leave anything, let's say by the time if you're not revised, so I would say still, for example, this evolutionary trend, this is a direct question which is asked. Hominidae, Equidae, and Proboscid. Okay. So one of these is going to come in exam. So you have to prepare three answers for this. Okay. So and there are not like multiple questions which can be framed out of it. The problem with this is, so this is like three questions. Preparing for three questions will give you one answer. Okay. Now you look at morphology, geological history, evolutionary trends. Okay, in one, two, three, four, five. Okay, and you have to study 1, 2, 3. So overall, if you see by combinations, 15 questions can be framed out of this. Okay, so it becomes again the question that you're going to get is likely one question only from this part. Okay, so the returns are less in this part in comparison to, for example, the last part. This applications part of microfossils you prepare. Okay, so different kinds of microfossils and applications. This one question is fixed. They can ask from this part. Okay, so at least applications part you prepare. Okay, and this fundamentals part they will ask one question. So for example, sometimes they may ask you modes of preservation of fossils. Sometimes they can ask you about species also. Species, what is definition, morphological concept. So this one basic fundamental question can come. Okay, so strategize in that way at this point of time. This part which I've said here, this whole segment, this one, it is not even there in this one. Actually, there are three more. This whole segment is not there in civil services syllabus. It is only present in forest syllabus. Okay. Anything to add, Mayank sir?
No. And I think if you have prepared this invertebrate and if you want to go in detail, I think trilobites are the most often asked question. Like they are
Yes.
asked twice in 4 year, right? हर एक साल छोड़ के पूछ लेते हैं तो लाइक दैट हैज बीन कवर्ड इन क्लासेस आल्सो, नोट्स भी हैं, वो कर लो, राइट? और बाकी लाइक इन दिस क्वेश्चन लाइक evolutionary trend in this elephant, man and horse, so like they 99.9% time they ask direct question. अब sometimes they ask you a difficult question, like in one of the year in last 10 years they asked that right evolutionary trend of mental capacity of men, right? We read overall evolutionary capacity, or they have asked very specific question. So like for forest services what you should do is like you should not be afraid. Like suppose this is, if it is in compulsory, you attempt this question, you make that diagram which we have prepared for evolutionary trend of man, right? So you already have content, apply that content and then try to write ki obviously mental capacity should have been increasing, right? And if you are from anthropology or in general also, you know that modern humans have about 1400 centimeter cube of brain size and earliest have around 400 सेंटीमीटर क्यूब साइड. तो फिर आप खुद ही से कुछ कुछ लिख दो कि कैसे ग्रेजुअली बढ़ते रहा होगा, बट वट एवर यू हैव लर्न, राइट दैट कंटेंट, राइट? उसको लिखना ही है, लिखना है, उस
Yes.
डायग्राम को बनानी
So,
है.
for example, horse you have studied. Now, if they ask specifically about teeth of horse, okay, how teeth have changed. So, if you have studied horse a little bit, you would know that teeth have become at least longer. Okay. So, because they went from browsing when they used to eat leaves from plants, small plants, shrubs, to eating grass. Now, grass when you eat grass from ground, you are going to eat some soil and sand also that can abrade your teeth. Okay, so when there is a lot of silt in water, you even have to stop your hydrothermal power plants because it is very abrasive. So the teeth became longer. So even if you remember like this conceptually one line, you can at least draw very simple diagram, nothing else. You can see maybe small teeth and then they become big teeth, this kind. So in forest, because again it is differential marking, so anything that you write, okay, so will provide you advantage over the students if they are not writing it. Okay, so don't be afraid, don't think that you have to write something special. As Mayank sir said, even if you write that the cranial capacity has progressively increased, that will carry some marks. Okay, so don't think that it is too simple.
Yes. And one last thing, another specific question which can be asked from this is about the evolution of foot of horse, right? It is a very popular question
Yes.
among geology professor, right? So in earlier time, what happened? What horse has five toes, right? Five toes. Then gradually it has been evolved to one toe, right? So this has been extensively covered in the notes also, in the class also. So prepare that well. And this last thing about Shiv, okay, sir is also drawing the diagram, right?
So
See,
this diagram you would have seen, na,
uh,
and then you can draw, and then
if you draw
you
this
just
diagram
send
you will
two
you will
toes
get,
up like this.
yes, right, if you are
Yes,
able to draw this
please.
diagram you will definitely get 2 to 3 marks more in a single question, right? So this is it. You just maybe this they will ask this year itself, right? So this was a
Yes.
specific question, and this last topic is Shivalik Fauna, Gondwana Flora. So like what I have also prepared a very short video on stratigraphy. Somebody people were asking. Sir has also like covered that in class. So I'll share that in some time on the portal as well as in the group. So in that also I have tried to cover Shivalik Fauna and Gondwana Flora. Right. So the utility of these two topics is extensive because it is also asked in stratigraphy. Right. Even in economic geology, like you have read about coal, right? Coal is like very this time I think in IFS I predict that they will ask petroleum, or right. Last time in civil services they've asked about coal, right? So like if they ask about coal, then just write how coal is formed, or age and everything. Also write stratigraphy and also chepo these points of Gondwana flora, right? If they're asking about Gondwana flora in paleontology, you chepo the stratigraphy of this Gondwana, right? Of this coal stratigraphy in paleontology, right? In economic geology, sorry. So you have to use this knowledge of paleontology and stratigraphy in economic geology, and the knowledge of economic geology or content of economic geology in this paper one. So like that is why this topic of Shivalik fauna or Gondwana flora, this is very very important because it is used in 3 units, right? So that is why I prepared this one well.
Yes, definitely. And even in general geology, you study like evidences of continental drift. You study that Glossopteris flora was actually not just in India, Gondwana. You can trace it in other Gondwana continents as well. Okay.
Yes.
So just, and there are those diagrams, for example, Glossopteris is very simple like this. Leaf you have to draw basically. Okay.
Hmm.
Telophylum is like this. Okay, how much time it is taking? It is taking, I think, less than 10 seconds to draw each diagram. Okay, so these 3 4 diagrams of leaves are there. Just revise those
Yes,
diagrams.
yes.
Okay.
And one major difference between this is like in Glossopteris, you just draw a leaf, and leaf will have a rib mid rib. There is a mid rib,
Yes.
right? एक line है बीच में, and then there is other line. In this Tilophyllum, which is the upper Gondwana flora, it is like if you have seen amle ki leaves, if you have seen that, which has no leaf, right? Even if you are able to draw this and you are able to write this single word that earlier have mid rib, the upper Gondwana don't have mid rib, it will give you at least 2 marks more, right? So these are very simple things. We will also discuss it in a short video, which will be uploaded, and Sir has also covered it in class.
Okay. So next is stratigraphy and geology of India. Okay. So in this one question will be from this fundamental part. Okay, classification, stratigraphy, lithostratigraphy, biostratigraphy, chronostratigraphy, and magnetostratigraphy, and their interrelationships. So this magnetostratigraphy, there is concept of magnetic reversals. So that can be asked in general geology as well or here. Okay, so magnetic reversals you prepare, and it is very simple concept that the magnetic field of Earth it flips. So North Pole polarity flips times. Okay, so North Pole will become South, South will become North Pole, magnetic pole. Okay, so that is there, and then you can write that as evidence for sea floor spreading. Okay, so where sea floor is being created, so these magnetic reversals are captured over there symmetrically around mid-oceanic region. Okay, chronostratigraphy is time stratigraphy. Okay, so in chronostratigraphy, you just do that. Biostratigraphy is based on fossils. Lithostratigraphy is based on rocks. So in lithostratigraphy, that scheme of classification where you have group, which you study here in other parts, group, okay, and then you can have subgroup, formation, member, bed. Okay, these are the keywords. If you write this, the main objective is done. Okay. Similarly, in biostratigraphy, if it is a long question, you can discuss different types of biozones. Okay. So biozones where basically one organism, let's say, is present during this time. Okay, so that becomes a range biozone. There could be assemblage biozone where many different organisms lived at the same time. It could be sort of like an overlap between them. So different types are there, and you can draw a simple correlation diagram. Is very simple when you have basically things like this. Okay, and you can just draw any fossil that you think of. You can draw a spiral like this, and you can draw a cone like this. Okay, very simple diagram, and then you can just show correlation between them, that you're correlating units based on fossils. Okay, in lithostratigraphy it is based on lithology, rock type. Okay, what kind of sandstone is there? So for example, in stratigraphy I've studied mud quartzite. So mud quartzite is the rock type. So you find that mud quartzite in Spiti, you find, let's say, in Garhwal. So you're correlating based on rock type. So that becomes lithostratigraphy. Okay. So you study, this is the, so one question will be asked from this part. Okay. The next one is, okay, distribution of Pre-Cambrian rocks of India. Okay. So this will be basically cratons, okay, and Kadapa and the Purana basins. So in cratons, the most important are Dharwad. Dharwad you should know. Okay. and the difference between Eastern Dharwad Craton and Western Dharwad Craton. Okay, and diagram is very simple as you have gone through this one. Okay, so there is close pit granite here, and another thing is Chitradurg thrust. Okay, and this close pit granite and Western Dharwad Craton, Eastern Dharwad Craton, and few. This is the main thing that you tried. They can ask you about difference also between these. Okay, so prepare for that as well. And then the Singbung one. In the basins part, Purana basins, which are again Pre-Cambrian. So there will be Vindhyan and Kadappa. These two are most important. And when you study these Vindhyan and Kadappa, okay, so you study their stratigraphy. Okay, they can ask you about mineral deposits. Okay, and sometimes they ask you about life as well during that time. Life during Vindhyan, life during Kadapa. Okay, so remember just one or two lines only. So, for example, in the life part, fawn limestone is there. Okay, in Vindhyan, verified stromatolites. Okay, in mineral deposits in Kadapa. Okay, so what is Mangampeta? Largest barite deposits that is of the in the world are found over there. Okay, so that becomes your key part. Okay, so just revise these three of this part. Okay, and the basic stratigraphy. If you cannot remember individual formations, okay, let's say by somehow you forget, but in Vindhyan you should at least remember. Okay, so the Semri, Kaimur, Reva, Bhander, like this. Okay, so these are the groups. Okay, so they have further formations in them. So this is very important. That this you don't skip. Okay, so in any case, so this part at least you remember. Okay, sometimes they can ask you. UPSC is doing. They can ask you only about summary group. Then you what will you write? Then you have to write about internal formations. But if that is the case, you can be sure that maybe other people will also not write. But this part you must know in this. Okay. All right. So this is what they will usually ask. They can ask a craton. Okay. So one question they will ask from principles. Another they will ask you is from Pre-Cambrian rock. So either they can ask you about a craton, or they can ask you about these Purana basins. Okay. Then there is Phanerozoic. So Phanerozoic can be divided into Paleo, Meso, and Sino. Okay. So Paleozoic rocks are basically one you studied Gondwana. Okay. So in Gondwana, the start from Permian, where you get Talchir boulder bed at the base. Then at the top, you can get basically Kashmir and Spiti, where you have Paleozoic successions. Beyond that, there are not many Paleozoic successions in India. Then you come to Mesozoic. In Mesozoic, they can ask you about the most important topic is Kutch, Jurassic. Okay, it is very frequently asked. Okay, so you remember Kutch, and other one is, let me write Bag. So Mesozoic, Kutch, stratigraphy, Bag, and Lameta beds. Okay, so these are the most important ones. They can ask you about Trishnopoli, which actually goes from both Meso to Sino. Similarly, Kutch also you can find Meso and Sino. Actually, this year they asked in the civil services about the Cenozoic stratigraphy, which actually is given in the slides on sedimentary basins of India. But again, they will not repeat that part. But these are the three important ones. Okay, they can ask you about Spiti and Kashmir. It is more likely it will be asked in Paleozoic. Okay, so they will not ask Mesozoic. All the Mesozoic rocks are found over there. Okay, and Cenozoic. Okay, so Cenozoic stratigraphy that you study, one is in Shivaliks. Okay, another one is in Assam. Okay, anything else you remember, Mayank sir? So these are the most important ones.
Yes, I think these are the important. And okay, and of course Himalayas, right? The formation of Himalayas.
Yes, Himalayas. Okay, so this part that you have to cover.
And I think in this Paleozoic, the most important is of course Gondwana, right? Coal, which we were talking about.
Yes. Okay, so Gondwana, it will be in Upper Paleozoic, only the Permian part. Okay, and then it will be Triassic here. So it will cover part of Paleozoic, part of Mesozoic. Okay, so this is Lower Gondwana is Permian, Upper Gondwana Triassic. Okay, all right, moving on to paper two. Okay, so anything left? Let me see in this one. Okay, no, hydrogeology, engineering geology still left. Start writing over there. Okay. And this tectonic framework of India also they can ask, and evolution of Himalaya. Okay, so this is the main one. Okay, igneous activity. Okay, so in igneous activity, so they can ask you about Deccan. Okay, Deccan volcanism, Deccan basalt. Okay, they can ask you about Raj Mahal traps. Okay, or Dalma. Okay, so if they ask you, it will be like one of these questions. Sometimes they may also about Malani igneous suit. Okay, but again, the most important. So usually one question can come from this part. Okay, but I would still say if you cannot go through these, at least Deccan traps you study. Okay, Deccan volcanism in India, because some part you already know. You can draw a diagram of India. India is moving northwards. Reunion hotspot is there. Volcanic activity is taking place. Raj Mahal traps is on the east side. It is related to Kerguelen Plateau in Antarctica, and that 90 East Ridge diagram is there. Okay, I think you have seen that diagram multiple times now. So for these both these at least those diagrams you can draw. Okay, even if you don't know the internal details, what stratigraphy will you cover here? Age you should know. Deccan traps, Cretaceous, Raj Mahal traps. Okay, I think they are Mesozoic or Permian. They are close to Gondwana times. Okay, so this age you should know, and basic diagrams if you can draw, your job will be done. Okay, so those simple things. All right. Now in hydrogeology syllabus can seem a little bit extensive. Okay, so this one is very simple. Hydrogeological cycle. Okay, water evaporates, clouds go, rainfall, snowfall happens, it returns back. You can write if you want residence time, but okay, that is simple. Genetic classification of water is you have meteoric water, which is rainwater basically. You can have juvenile water, which is magmatic water. You can have connate water, which is present in the sedimentary pores since deposition. Okay, so this part is very simple. Movement of subsurface water, springs. I think springs part is you just like Google it anywhere. Or Mayank sir, have you shared this part? Springs, I'm not sure.
I can share the notes
You
also,
just share
but
this part.
it is also
Yeah.
given in GC Long, I think, na classification of
Yes.
springs.
So this is very simple thing. Okay, the types of springs that you get. Okay, so movement of subsurface water here, that is where they can ask you about Darcy's law. Okay, which is very simple, where Q equals to K dH by dL into area. Okay, these definitions: permeability, porosity, permeability, hydraulic conductivity, transmissivity, storage coefficient, classification of aquifers part is very easy. So this you anyway prepare. Aquifer, aquitard, aquiclude, aquifuge. Four types are there. Okay. Porosity, permeability. So you go through basic concepts. Once or twice they've asked you about different types of fracture porosity and all. So that is very advanced topic. So sometimes you just skip those
Skip
questions.
those, or you
Okay.
just
So
write
don't.
about secondary porosity. कुछ नहीं है तो you can
Yes.
use.
So whatever you remember about secondary porosity that fractures are created, you can write that it is a type of secondary porosity and all. Okay. So now there can be many complicated fracture networks. Okay, which can form in rocks. So you don't have to really go through that much of detail. But these definitions of porosity, Okay, types of porosity, primary, secondary, this part you should know. Okay, similarly, permeability, hydraulic conductivity will come already from Darcy's law. Okay, and transmissivity is nothing, it is hydraulic conductivity multiplied by the thickness of the aquifer. Okay, so just like one line definition. Storage coefficient and storativity coefficient. It is basically how much water will be yielded, okay, by rock by per unit decrease in drawdown. So basically, if you decrease this by one, how much Q you will get. Okay, so think of it in that way. That is how much aquifer is storing. Okay. Then the next part is water bearing characteristics of rocks and groundwater chemistry slide we have shared. Okay, although this is not very often asked. Water bearing characters of rocks, again, it is a little bit related to, they'll not ask like very specific question, but it is more related to the types of aquifers only that you will have. Okay. Anything add you want to add, Mayank sir?
I think same thing, right? Like here in water bearing characteristic of rock, you can use whatever you have learned for about porosity, permeability.
Yes.
That is all you have to write in the
Yeah,
syllabus.
it is sort of like combination of all these things. Correct.
And see, like there is a one trend in this hydrogeology. Like 90% time, they to make a question, they will just copy paste the topic of the syllabus, right? 90% of time, they will ask you write a short note on types of well, write a short note on uh, uh, classification of aquifer, right? Discuss about saltwater intrusion. They will not even do any work to make it a bit complicated. This is one of the trend. The second 10% of time, they will ask you very deep questions, right? Like they ask some this aquifer performance test and all these things. So see, hydrogeology is actually a very big topic in geology. Like there is an exam, geoscientist examination. They have a dedicated paper for this, right? So it is a huge field. So UPSC has given us very basic syllabus, so we can expect very basic question also. But sometimes, like once or twice in 5 to 10 years, they will ask some difficult question. So that is about luck. So you should not get bothered about that, right? So a lot of people who were who they were asking about some answers to previous question and they were a bit difficult. So don't get bothered. At least prepare basics first and leave them. Right? It's all right to leave.
Yeah, and those kind of questions will not be repeated very often. Okay, so aquifer performance tests and all. Okay, so well performance test, you drill a well. There are actually complicated three-dimensional calculus is involved in those equations. Okay,
Hmm.
so aquifer test is there. You take water out. Okay, so different types of are there. So because that is also not directly mentioned in the syllabus, aquifer tests. Okay, so once or twice they do ask those bouncer questions, but again, as Mohit sir said, you don't need to be very bothered about those. Now they can ask you about saltwater intrusion, which is a very simple topic. Okay, sea water is heavier than basically salty water is heavier than fresh water, so it intrudes into and it stays below. And once you get balanced gravitational gravity, you get what is called Guyban-Herzberg relation. Okay, so diagram is very simple. So
Hmm.
if salt water is intrusion is happening here, so this is the ground surface. Okay, so this interface will develop, and they will ask you basically this: if this is the height and this is the depth, okay, of salt water, okay, and this is the height of the ground, Z is roughly 40 times H. Okay, and this relation is, I think, rho F by rho C minus rho F. Okay, S. So into H. Okay, so this if you put in salinity of water, fresh water, salinity of salty water, you get this value of 40. So this is a very simple thing. Okay, so in your notes it is also there, and factors which can increase saltwater intrusion. For example, if you withdraw too much of groundwater in coastal areas, so then salt water is going to come and take its place. So those basic things that you can do.
And
Type of wells.
and also
Okay,
in syllabus,
so these
sorry.
types of wells is, yes.
So like in syllabus, they have written just saltwater intrusion. So like in like 2017, they asked, like sir said, Guyban Herzberg, if I am pronouncing it right, like principle, right? So it is saltwater intrusion only. So a lot of people will not be aware of that also. So you just write that in your note. Guyban Herzberg, if they ask, it is about saltwater, right? And also it has good linkages with environmental geology. In environmental geology, there is coastal processes, coastal hazard directly mentioned in the syllabus. So this is also an issue in the coastal areas, saltwater intrusion. So you can use this name Guyban Herzberg in paper 2 environmental geology also, even if it is not directly asked here. right? Okay, sir.
Okay, so from the engineering geology part, okay, basically that Bangad book is principles of engineering geology. So dams, tunnels, okay, a lot of things are given over there. So you can just keep that as reference, just revise from there. The part which is not given over there, earthquake resistant structures. Okay, so for that we have provided you hand notes. So just go through that part. Okay. So in hydrogeology, they will ask you basically all these topics will they can ask you maximum one question, and usually it will be a 10 mark. Oh, sorry, 8 marker question. Okay, so it will be a shorter question, and usually from this part one question will come only. Okay, and then from these types of wells or rainwater harvesting, groundwater recharge, one question can come, and then one question possibly from somewhere in the middle, and one question from engineering. So actually these are two subjects. This is not one subject. It is hydro and engineering. So broadly these are the type of questions that you will get in here. So earthquake resistant structures, for example, they can ask. Alkali aggregate reaction is also important. Okay, so just go through these parts.
I think this is also known as.
So all the number of questions
I
which
think,
can be
sir,
framed,
this A or alkali
it repeats.
aggregate reaction is also known as concrete cancer, right?
Yes.
So sometimes they will give you concrete cancer as a question. So it is they are asking about AR only, alkali aggregate reaction. So like do it in a priority. Alkali aggregate reaction. It has been not asked from last 3 4 years. So there is a chance they will ask here. This landslide they will ask every year. They ask almost every year. Like 4 times out of 5 times they will ask landslides, like something on that.
Yes.
And one question is fixed. They will ask about just like evolutionary trend of man, elephant, and horse. They will ask something about geological investigation of either bridge, either dam, or what is tunnel, right?
Correct.
90
So one
70%
question
time
will
dam.
come from you. Yes, yes. So this question, one of these will come in the exam. Okay. Diagram, they may ask you about dam, different parts of dam, types of dams also. Okay. So, but basic things, geological investigations, the keyword is there. So that is the most likely. So this is given in Bangar. Just ratify from Bangar this part. Okay. Okay. The next part. Okay. I think well, I'll try to be a little bit quick in this part. Okay. Mineralogy. Okay, the must know parts, the easiest part which you can do is, okay, is international system of crystallographic notation. This is very simple. Okay, most of the student will confuse between this. Okay, another name for this one is, okay, Hermann Moigen notation. Okay, Hermann or HM notation. Okay, so this from PJ's notes. Okay, so I think it is not given perfectly. So just this for this one part. Okay, so don't go to those PJ's notes. So just study what has been taught in the class. HM notation. It is very simple. So rotational is given by number. A mirror plane is given by M. If mirror is perpendicular to rotation, you put a slash in between. That's all there is in HM notation. You just have to write it in lines. Okay. So this is rotation. This is mirror. If mirror is parallel, you just write 4m. And if the mirror is perpendicular to rotation, you write 4 by m. That's the only thing in HM notation. Okay. Projection is very similar to what you studied in structural. So if this question comes, so conceptually it is same. Few points of differences you should know that here in crystallography it is upper hemisphere and lower hemisphere, and it is equal angle. In structural geology, but other than that, diagrams will look same. 3D diagram that you have to draw. So for example, diagram is very simple, which you draw is if you have any, let's say, plane, a plane will intersect here, then you join it in the pole and you get a arc here. Or if you plot a pole to the plane, then you just join it like this. Okay. So these two diagrams which are there in your notes, you just practice them and your job will be done. Crystal defects, a very simple topic. Okay, so you know line defects, point defects. Points are shorty, fractional. So just revise. This is like 11th class NCRT, 11th or 12th class NCRT stuff. Okay, so this is, and even X-ray crystallography is easy. Okay, so X-ray crystallography is Bragg's law. Okay, so if they ask you questions from this part, you will be able to tackle them, okay, easily. Now, the only challenging part, Mayank sir has shared like very concise notes for you with these parts also, is this one. Okay, now because here there are actually 32 crystal classes, but they will usually ask only normal class. So there are seven crystal systems, so you have to study only seven, and there is a definite pattern to those. So Mayank sir said, like for example, you can either memorize them by phone number, or if you want like just to go through conceptually. So it's like whatever way you find easy like learning. So you have basically both options. So if you cover this part, okay, so one question will be definitely most of the times will be from this part. Another question will be from this part. Okay. So after that, the next part will be from this petrological microscope, optical properties, etc. Is basically sort of like similar thing. Okay, so you just study that part. Okay, so this they asked last year, so I don't think they will ask this year. If this year, I think they can ask you about some accessory in an 8 marker question. So for example, they can give you the basic, the most common accessory which is asked in the exam is accessory plate. Okay, in the name itself it has accessory. So quartz wedge, gypsum plate, mica plate, these three words you know. And you know like quartz wedge will have variable retardation, and basically you will understand this after you understand these concepts of pleochroism, extinction angle, double refraction, birefringence, twinning, dispersion. Okay, so these are all 8 marker questions. So just prepare like short answers for these ones. Okay, so so you can write them in the exam. Okay, and in accessories, those are the main ones. Another one which you can write in accessories is Bertrand lens and conoscopic lens, which is used in interference figures. Physical and chemical characters of rock forming silicate minerals. Again, this is an important question. Okay, and structural classification of silicates. So this is, I think, one of the most important one, right, Mayank sir?
Yes.
Structural classification of silicates. So single chain, double chain, isolated, okay, framework, and then their names: ino, philo, okay, sorosilicate, orthosilicate, tectosilicate. You prepare answer on this, because if you prepare answer for this one, now this is already at least you can write something in that physical chemical properties of silicate groups. Okay, so for example, you know olivine is single chain silicate. Sorry, olive pyroxene is single chain silicate. So if you get a question on pyroxene, if nothing else, you can draw a single chain like this for pyroxene group. Okay, so one question will come from this part of rock forming silicate minerals. So the most important ones are feldspars, pyroxene, and amphibole. These three are the most important ones. Okay, they may ask you about olivine, quartz, polymorphs, and all, but in terms of importance, those three are the ones. Okay,
And this
igneous and metamorphic
this
rocks. This is not usually asked, so this is covered in this silicate mineral groups only. Okay, yes.
like we would recommend ki you at least rectify these two, what sir says, at least name of few amphiboles, pyroxene and what else, feldspar, right? So even if they are not asking you, even if you are not able to attempt it in mineralogy, if you are able to rectify name of few of the names or that triangular classification, it will help you a lot in metamorphic as well as in igneous, right? So it will give you a lot of numbers there indirectly, even if you are mentioning the name of feldspar, right? Like that, even in
Yes,
remembering the
and
mineral
even this
aspect.
part is usually they don't ask it. Okay, but if by chance they ask about like petrographic significance of plagioclase feldspar, okay, now you use your information of igneous and metamorphic rock. Okay, so you have studied in plagioclase feldspar that solid solution diagram, very simple. Okay, so you have Na rich, albite, Ca rich, anorthite here. Okay, so apply those concepts here which you have studied. Okay, similarly, this classification is very important. Okay, of orthoclase. So K feldspar, KNaCa, that is orthoclase, albite, anorthite. Okay, and it goes like this. So that classification diagram you memorize. Similarly for pyroxenes as well. Okay, igneous and metamorphic. Okay, so this is again actually two very big subjects combined as one. So repetition usually I would say in terms is like the most important part is this crystallization behavior of albite anorthite, diopside anorthite, diopside, wollastonite, silica. So this part you can ignore, never asked in the exam. Okay, so this is not even given in any research paper or books. Okay, so 1940, some old, very some, if you go to very old libraries somewhere, then you may be able to find it, but that is why they don't ask it also. Okay, so one of these questions is going to come in exam, phase diagram. So there are only two for you: albite anorthite, diopside anorthite. Okay, so one is solid solution, another is eutectic. So remember these keywords. So anyway, when this question comes, so you have to write that part, draw the phase diagram, and basically study the crystallization behavior. Okay, so you have to, you have these things in notes. Single question generation of magma. Okay, it is a very simple question. How magma is generated? You just studied this. In crystallization, you just need to study fractional crystallization. Okay, and rate of cooling. That if you have fast rate of cooling, you have fine grained rock. If you have slow rate of cooling, you have coarse grained rock. And if it is very fast, you get amorphous. It is not even crystalline, so it becomes glassy. So that is the crystallization behavior of magma. Very simple. Okay, keep it simple, don't complicate. Reaction principle, many students get confused in this part. This is nothing, this is Bowen's reaction series. Okay, magmatic differentiation assimilation. Okay, this is part of, they can ask you either differentiation or assimilation, or they can ask you about diversification of magma. Okay, so magma, when it generated from mantle, it was ultramafic. How did it become, sorry, mantle is ultramafic, the belt which was generated was basaltic. So how do you get basically felsic rocks, intermediate rocks? Okay, so through these processes of differentiation, assimilation, crystal fractionation and all. Okay, so this is also a very simple topic. Igneous petrology is very simple. Okay, and then this part you have already notes for this. Granite, sienite. Okay, one question can come from this part. So these are possibly 9 questions. So for these you all have one page notes. Okay. All right. So then Deccan volcanic province. Okay. So it is overlapping with stratigraphy. Okay. So stratigraphy, they asked you about igneous provinces of India. So one of them is Deccan volcanic province. So here also they can ask you the same thing, is like India is moving northward, reunion hotspot activity is there. Okay. Now, igneous petrology is very simple. Okay, so then moving on to types and agents of metamorphism, which is also not that difficult. Okay, so this one is a direct question which you have already prepared. So types will be those regional metamorphism, contact metamorphism, dynamic metamorphism, dynamo regional, metasomatism. So these are the main types. And agents, you know, are heat, pressure, temperature, fluids, circulating fluids, which take place part in metasomatic. So very simple question is there. Metamorphic grades and zones, one question can be asked. So this is Barrovian. So Barrovian word is not given here anywhere. Okay, but if you are asked about this Barrovian metamorphism, you have to write about these grades and zones. If you are asked about grades and zones, don't miss this keyword Barrovian. Okay, so you have to mention that. Phase rule is same as what you studied in igneous rule. Very simple. F equals to C minus phi plus 2. Okay, you define this phase rule, define what these terms are, and draw a diagram of kyanite, sillimanite, andalusite, and show that phi equals to 2 here. At this point, lines phi equals to 1, and here phi equals to 0. Your job is done. Okay. So because here it is Al to SiO5, this diagram, why I'm saying is, if you are asked about polymorphism, you can draw this diagram. These are all polymorphs of Al to SiO5, aluminosilicate. So you have andalusite, sillimanite, kyanite. Okay. So in phase rule, simple. Okay. So in 2 minutes, you revise this. Phases of regional and contact metamorphism. Okay. So Mayank Sir has also shared. Sometimes it is drawn by depth. Sometimes it is drawn by pressure, like this. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So these are the phases. Hornfells are of contact metamorphism. These will be, okay, regional metamorphism, where you will get zeolite, perianite, pumpelite, green schist, amphibolite, granulite, and you can get high PT series. They Usually you should at least know this part. You have to draw the whole diagram. Even if they ask you about contact, draw the whole thing and then say this is the contact metamorphism. Okay, you have blue schist and eclogite here. Okay, so this is one of the most important parts within metamorphic. So facies part is the most important. Okay, ACF, AKF is very simple. A stands for aluminium, C stands for Al2O3, C stands for CaO3, F stands for iron, FeO. And you add MgO also to it. Okay, a little bit modification. Here, instead of calcium, you will get potassium. Okay, and the only thing that you should remember here is that the calcium in ACF is in excess of calcium in feldspar. The K in AKF is in excess of potassium in feldspar. So that part you should remember. Sorry, not C and K, it is A, aluminium. Okay. So excess of plagioclase, excess of feldspar. So very basic thing. And then diagram, you know, very simple. So if this is ACF, mud rocks, peletic rocks are here. Basic rocks are, you know, mafic in nature. So they will plot here. Calcareous rocks, limestone, dolomite, they will plot here. And arenaceous, quartzo, feldspathic rocks will plot here. So you're asked about metamorphism of arenaceous, argillaceous, basic rocks. Calcareous is not there in the syllabus. Okay. So if you're asked about any of these, okay, so you memorize this diagram ACF. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. This is argillaceous or peletic. Okay. This is arenaceous. This is basic. And this is calcareous. So if nothing else, if the question comes, write a note on metamorphism of arenaceous rock. Draw this diagram and show this is arenaceous. Okay. So because you have already studied ACF, AKF for the topics, direct question comes. Write a note on ACF diagram, write a note on AKF diagram. So once, if you have studied them, why not use this in this answer? Okay. So, and this basic rocks. Okay. And basic notes you have for all these questions. So revise that part also. So one question will come. They will not give 3 questions. So either they will give arenaceous or argillaceous or basic. Most common is argillaceous. Okay, peletic rocks. So if nothing else, draw this diagram. Okay, then you can draw these facies also. Okay, and then say the basic thing that you have studied is, for example, in argillaceous rocks, you have shale, which becomes slate, which becomes phyllite, which becomes schist, and finally gneiss or granulite. Okay, so just remember that sequence basically. Okay, mineral assemblages of different facies, so it is basically combined with facies only. Retrograde metamorphism is not very often asked in the exam. Okay, so retrograde metamorphism, that PTT path is there. So prograde metamorphism, pressure temperature is increasing. Retrograde metamorphism, pressure temperature is decreasing. Okay, retrograde, just remember this part. Okay, maybe we didn't discuss this in detail in the class. Okay, so just remember this part in retrograde, that retrograde reactions are usually very slow. Okay, so they are very slow in nature. What is the reason for this slowness is that first of all, retrograde, they take place at low temperature. So at low temperature reactions are slow. Second is absence of fluids. Okay, which has 2 effects. Okay, fluids act as catalyst, so no catalyst. Because what fluids can do is they can carry ions from one place to another. Okay, and the second one is no, fluids act as an ingredient. Okay, so no hydration. So these retrograde reactions usually only take place during hydrothermal alteration, but otherwise they do not take place. Okay, and if the retrograde reaction does not take place, means a mineral which is stable at high pressure temperature, diamond is stable in mantle, now you're putting it on your finger, so your finger doesn't have the conditions of mantle, so it should undergo retrograde, but it doesn't undergo because of these reasons. So it is very slow, so that is called metastable. So they can exist in metastable state. So if you write these words, your answer will be done. Okay, now what do you mean by catalyst? They carry ions. Hydration is, you have studied many metamorphic reactions which are dehydration reactions. So during prograde, water is removed When that water is removed, it escapes. So when you have to do retrograde reaction, now that water has gone, it is not available. So if the product itself, reactant is not available, how will it take place? Okay. All right. So this next part is sedimentology and sedimentary rocks. Okay. So diagenesis, lithifaction, direct question is asked. Okay. Usually process of formation, they don't usually ask much from this. So they can ask you write a note on diagenetic and lithification process. Okay. Properties of sediments you should know. Okay. For example, that we have studied in terms of uh, textures, shape, size of clast. Okay. All those things. This is also important, clastic and non-clastic rocks. Okay. So in this one, Dunham classification of limestone is important, and Petty-Jones classification of sandstone is important, and third, conglomerate is important. So these three are the most important parts. Okay. They can ask you about forks also. Okay. So this year in CSE they asked forks. So I don't think they will ask it in the forest. So for forest they can ask you Dunham. So three important: Dunham, fork. So fork they asked, but if they for future, so Dunham and fork in limestone, Petty-Jones in sandstone, and conglomerate. It's not by name, but you should know that orthoconglomerate, paraconglomerate, grain supported, clast supported part. Okay, and and then you can have basically conglomerate and breccia if the clasts are rounded or angular. Okay, so just go through that part. Petrography, depositional environment. Depositional environment, I told you one rule of thumb that you have to remember is fine grained means low energy, coarse grained means high energy. Okay, just as in igneous petrology, fine grained means fast cooling, slow grained means coarse grained means slow cooling. So here it is in terms of energy of water which is moving. So if you can write that part, okay. So for example, if you get conglomerate is very large in size, so you write high energy. Let's say they ask about shale, it fine grained, so low energy. At least this keyword you write. Okay, and I've explained in the class where are those low energy, high energy environments. Okay, sedimentary facies and provenance. So this also sedimentary facies is a little bit overlap with geomorphology, but here they ask about delta and fluvial. These are the most important parts. In fluvial, they can ask you about braided and meandering. Okay. And then this is the most important part, sedimentary structures and their significance. So in this one, you please write notes on ripples. Okay. Cross bedding. Okay. Or cross strata. And there's types. Okay. So for example, hummocky cross stratification and all those things. Okay. Bedding. And then these are, for example, depositional structures. Then we studied erosional structures, flute cast. Okay, so basically scour marks, tool marks. Okay, so there are two types. So flute cast is type of scour mark. So scour mark, and the what else was there? There was tool mark. Okay, these are the two main important ones. And then soft sediment deformation. So this part they can ask in the exam. And heavy mineral analysis and provenance are related to one another. So we have studied this in one of the lectures. So just revise. So this question also comes in the exam. Very frequently it comes. Write a note on heavy mineral analysis. Okay. Heavy mineral analysis question. So please prepare. There is only one question which can be framed. Once they asked intrastratal in transit solutions. Okay. Very fancy keywords. But in transit is nothing. In transit is like when it is being transported by rivers. And once those heavy minerals get deposited under layers, it becomes in between layers means intrastratal. Okay. So this is there in your notes. So please just go through those parts. Okay. But only once they asked, 99% students left it that year. Okay. In transit, intrastratal. But general question you should prepare. What is heavy mineral analysis? What is a heavy mineral which has density greater than 2.85? Examples of those heavy minerals. Okay. And that stability is there. Okay. So and then applications, they tell you about provenance of the rock. So this is related to provenance only. Okay. All right. Sedimentary basins of India is a very vast topic. Okay. So there are many sedimentary basins in India. They can ask you about stratigraphy of all of any of them. So for example, they asked about stratigraphy of Triassic of Kutch. Uh, Slides are there in the course. If you have to revise stratigraphy, anything of these, the most important will be, okay, I think, how many sedimentary basins are there? 26, or I'm forgetting the name. Okay.
26.
So if you have to revise, okay, it can be very daunting. You can just leave it also, okay, I would say. So it will be Kutch, Cambay, actually there are many, okay. Bombay offshore or Mumbai high. Sometimes they ask you about Mumbai high and Bombay offshore or Western offshore basin, which is basically west coast offshore of Mumbai. And KG basin is there, Kaveri is there, and Assam Arkan basin is there. Okay, so one, two, three, four, five, six. Okay, so these are the most important ones. Basically, if they ask you about petrol from petroleum geology point of view, you have to write their source rock, reservoir rock, all those things. Okay, so it can be a little bit challenging. I think Mayank Sir can share some notes with you also, concise notes of these things if you want to revise it like at the end, because usually they do ask one question from the sedimentary basins part of India, sir. Okay.
And like if you
If
have to,
nothing else, you should know the diagram of this. Okay, so where are they occurring? If nothing else, for example, if nothing else, you can draw that western offshore Mumbai basin is here, Krishna Godavari basin is here, Kaveri basin is here, Assam Arkan basin will be here, Kutch Cambay basin will be here, Jaisalmer basin will be here. So this is where you find oil in India basically. Okay, so these petroliferous basins they ask mostly in sedimentology. Purana basins they ask in stratigraphy. Okay. Finally, the last section, economic geology. Okay, so Mayank sir, you can go through this one.
okay, like for sedimentology, if you don't have,
I
sorry,
think you're on mute.
for like for sedimentology, if you have to prepare only one topic, suppose, then that topic should be sedimentary structures and the significance, right? That is the most commonly asked question from sedimentology. Like there will be more questions, but they will ask this for sure. Okay. And okay, now in economic geology, right? See, this economic geology is also pretty vast, right? So like I have prepared a very short video for this also, that I'll share. You can see it after your GK English paper, right? So in that way, but for just for discussing purpose, the first thing you should cover in this economic geology is this overview of ore forming processes, right? So like there are basically 6 7 ore forming processes you will get, which is the topic. Like see, the first is this ore mineral gang, tenor of the old, classification of ore deposits. So these are very basic things. We have been reading about ore and this gang and all these things, so since our like school days, so they are not going to ask directly on it, right? The first topic which can be asked in exam is classification of ore deposits, right? So there are two main classification. One is Batman classification, right? So this is the actually this Batman one is the most commonly asked one. There are some other, right? Nageli and Schneider Dawn, all other. So I've shared this even as in a slide. You just remember the name of these. You can say there are some people who have given certain kinds of classification. The most common is Batman classification, and then you write whatever you have read in economic geology, right? So there are 7 8 types of ore deposits, like how ore is formed. One is ore is formed through magmatic process. Now, like just based on geology, then apart from petrology, there is sedimentary processes, there is metamorphic processes, right? Then there are some very specific processes like hydrothermal. It is also pretty much like magmatic. Then there is supergene enrichment. So whatever you have read in economic geology, everything you can write in classification, just 2 line of that. So that is classification, and that is what Batman has talked about. So this is one thing, right? This is not very commonly asked. Then the next topic is processes of ore formation, or processes of formation of mineral deposit. So this is important, right? So this is all economic geology or geology is about this only. So in this, prepare short notes on supergene enrichment, right? It is something which can be asked as in standalone manner, right? Then then there are some these smaller topics, right? Control of ore localization, ore texture, and then there is this metallogenic epoch and provinces, right? So these are three small topics. Notes have been shared for this, right? Like this topic, metallogenic provinces and epoch, I'm expecting that this will be asked this year in IFS, right? So like you should know what is metallogenic. Metallogenic is genic is love, the root word, and metal. So something epoch is related to geological time, province is related to geography, right? So it is asking about what are the metallogenic, like metal having time period, right? In geological time period, there are certain time period which had certain mineral. Like Lawrence was talking about that in Carboniferous Permian time, there was a lot of coal formation, right? Which we are getting. In the Cenozoic time, we had a lot of petroleum formation, right? Most of the gold which we get in Karnataka, that is of Archean time, right? So these are time period in which certain elements are found, right? So it is this thing. So whatever you have read, you can do it and you can go through it, right? You have to just write 4 to 5 points, and this is also given pretty well in Bangar, right? Just I think 100 words note is there. Same thing is provinces. Whatever you have read in stratigraphy, sir was talking about cratons and shield. So in all the cratons, you get certain kinds of economic mineral, right? In this Singbum craton, we get a lot of mineral. In Dharwad, we get iron, we get gold, we get even certain amount of aluminium and a lot of things. Even in this Aravali's, right, in this Aravali province, or you can click on, we get a lot of lead, zinc, and copper, right? In GS, you have heard about K3 deposits, right? Even in Madhya Pradesh, the central Indian Creton, near Balaghat area, you get a lot of manganese, a lot of even a lot of other minerals also. In Bihar, in Singhbhum, you also get mica. So that is what this topic is asking. So you can write it in your way. You can draw the diagram, something like that, right? In this O texture, you can go through the notes, but a lot of things is pretty much like igneous petrology only, right? In igneous, you have read about textures, so there are certain overlap in the name of the textures. Obviously, there are some very specific textures in ore geology also, right? So one thing is like the one difference is that in igneous or in petrology, mineralogy, we were using optical microscope, right? Uh, Transmitted light microscopy was there. Here we use reflected light microscope, right? So microscope is same, but the kind of the size is different, a bit different, right? So that is not in the syllabus. So just prepare something. This is not very commonly asked, right? Even if you see previous question, they are not asking a lot on this, right? So the most important thing in this topic, the two topic which you should prepare is this. First is processes of formation of mineral. There are 7 8 processes, right? उसी से आपका क्लासिफिकेशन का क्वेश्चन भी हो जाएगा, एंड आपके बहुत सारे स्टैंड अलोन क्वेश्चन भी सॉल्व हो जाएंगे, राइट? सो डू दिस. Bangad is all about this, right? And then specifically this geology of important Indian deposits of certain metal which UPSC has mentioned, right? So UPSC has mentioned I think 12 13 element directly, right? So they have mentioned aluminium, chromium, copper, gold, iron, lead, zinc, right? Titanium, uranium, all these things. So like you can slot this also, right? Based on these questions they ask, right? So here they have given deposits of coal and petroleum. So coal and petroleum is a standalone topic. 1 year they will ask on coal, another year they will ask on petroleum, and 1 year they will take a break. Then they will ask on coal, petroleum, break, something like that, right? So prepare both. Prepare coal, how coal was formed. There are two very small theories. One is in situ, that there were forests, they got submerged due to inundation, due to increase in the sea level, and those forests have carbon content. It basically metamorphosed, in a very simple language, metamorphosed to coal, all those rocks and, right, that carbon content. So that is in situ theory. Another theory is all this coal or all those carbon material, it drifted somewhere, right, towards along with the rift, and it deposited somewhere else. So we call it drift theory, right? So in India generally we get this drift kind of coal. That is why the quality of a coal is not that good. In USA, most of the coal, as per this theory, is in situ, right? So they have relatively better quality. Same is with the Australia, right? So this is theory of coal. Remember where coal is formed, Damodar Valley, all these things, right? Remember the Gondwana stratigraphy, right? Like there is also a mnemonic which we made is तड़प के मर जाओगे, right? Something like that you can make yourself. So T is for Talcher, then D is for Damoda, then P is for Panchet, then M is for Mahadev, something like that. So it is the Damoda of group. We get a lot of coal deposits, right? So there is 4 formations: Barakar formations, Raniganj formations, and one more is there. right? And one is barren, which where we don't get coal. So if they're asking anything on coal, you dump the stratigraphy, right? These technical jargons, right? Stratigraphy and these four name. Remember this Tadapke, something like this. So D for Damuda, right?
Yes.
Then write about the
And very
theory.
simple diagram you can draw like India you have seen many times. So here where that those valleys are there mostly because you study this in Gondwana as well. You can draw that in Gondwana. Okay, so where Damodar Valley is there,
Right.
Godavari, and then you can just see this. Actually, here rifting was initiated, but then that rifting was failed later on, and that is how you got those like straight sort of like grabens where that water was present and where those basically coal forest found. So this you can write in your Gondwana, this map of India, and you can draw this even in this coal deposits as well.
Okay. So like I'll come back to this geology of important minerals. I'll cover this coal, petroleum and other parts, then we'll come back to that. So like coal we have covered. Similarly, as far as like in petroleum we have covered, there are four important, and time is the fifth factor for this petroleum formation, right? So if they can ask you what are the factors which lead to petroleum formation, or what are the elements or some keywords, you just have to write about those four five
Elements,
things.
gradients,
Gradients, yes.
ingredients, they will ask
Ingredient.
these things.
Yes, yes. So they are very important. Prepare them. There is a 50% chance that one of them will come. Right. This national mineral policy, they are. This is, I think, very much asked in civil services. Even in forest, they can ask, and they will ask mostly this in compulsory. Right. This 8 marker. So just prepare a note on national mineral policy. There is a policy in 2018, I think, a revived policy of 2019. Notes have been shared. Right. So कर लो आपने prepare भी कर रखा होगा. Same is they can ask the conservation and utilization. Right. So prepare good notes on it. Right? Exam में you might have to attempt this conservation and utilization of mineral resources. So what is the need? What is the context? थोड़ा सा data, good highlighting point, all this thing, right? And then there is about unclosed. Sir is writing the sources, reservoir, seal trap, migration. These are all ingredients of a petroleum system, right? And we have also shared handwritten notes. They are more than sufficient to score very well in it. Sometime in petroleum, they ask about specific, like they might ask about tell us about the ingredients or the elements of petroleum system in Assam or in Bombay High, right? So they're going in deep. Again, आपको यही लिखना है, source क्या है, reservoir क्या है, seal trap, right? What are these things? तो उसमें थोड़ा specific है, तो उसके लिए भी एक एक पेज के नोट शेयर कर रखे हैं, ग्रुप पे भी I have shared, even in the portal we have shared. So rectify them. They are very very high yield, right? So this is very high yield. Similarly, in this law of sea, there is UNCLOS, right? United Nations Convention on Law of Sea. So this you have covered in general studies also. The same thing, right? How United Nations has divided the this marine area, right? There is territorial water, then there is contiguous, then there is right exclusive economic zone, all those things, right? 12 nautical miles and one is 370 nautical miles. The same thing, nothing, right? But see, you can attempt it. So these are most important topics till now. Is one is classification over deposit, or rather process of ore formation, right? The 7 8, just prepare them. Prepare standalone notes on laterites as well as supergene enrichment. That's it. And then prepare well about this one. What we say, coal and petroleum. This is the second thing. Third thing is prepare on this general studies wala part, national mineral policy, conservation, and it won't take more than an hour or half for you to prepare, right? Not even an hour for this topic. And the fourth topic, which is actually differentiating, which differentiate your marks in paper 2, is this one: geology of Indian deposits of aluminium, chromium, right? So see, I'll make a very short video, half an hour का video on this. So you have some content to dump in the exam, but class में भी कराया हुआ है. So see that also. And इसमें अब see फर्क क्या है इसमें? They are asking geology. If it is written that tell us about the geography of important Indian deposits of aluminium, right? Or tell us geography of important Indian deposits of copper, right? So like I am pretty sure you must be able to attempt it, right? So in geography of copper, it is about general studies paper 1, distribution of mineral resources, right? There is a topic distribution. So वही हो गया geography. So in geography you will just make India का map, you'll show it कि कहाँ पे कॉपर मिलता है. कॉपर इज फाउंड इन राजस्थान, अरावली, है ना? जियोलॉजी के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू में यू कैन राइट इन अरावली, क्रिटॉन. उसके बाद सेंट्रल इंडिया में मिलता है, मध्य प्रदेश में, इन इवन इट इज इन सिंहभूम के कुछ पार्ट में मिलता है, थोड़ा सा इट इज ऑल्सो फाउंड इन आंध्र प्रदेश, राइट? दीज आर द 4 एरियाज. तो ये पता होना चाहिए. तो अब वो ज्योग्राफी है. जियोलॉजी में यू राइट ज्योग्राफी ऑल्सो, You write your general studies ka knowledge also, and there are 2 3 more dimension which you should be able to write, right? So suppose you are writing about copper. So copper का what is the ore forming process of copper, right? So ये याद कर लेना, कॉपर या तो मैग्मेटिक होगा, या तो हाइड्रोथर्मल होगा, सेडिमेंट्री होगा, मेटामॉर्फिक होगा, सुपरजीन होगा. These were the 5 main process, right? So copper is mostly hydrothermal. So remember, first aspect is uh, this ore forming process. Second thing is about uh, किस रॉक के साथ मिलता है, राइट? एज ए जियोलॉजिस्ट यू विल गो टू अ फील्ड, यू विल फाइंड रॉक्स, एंड रॉक्स के साथ यू विल फाइंड कॉपर, राइट? माइनिंग में भी वी माइंड बेसिकली रॉक्स. तो व्हाट आर द रॉक्स, राइट? सो कॉपर के साथ देयर आर सम स्पेसिफिक काइंड्स ऑफ रॉक, राइट? लाइक इन केस ऑफ क्रोमियम, host rock, like Jordan Sir is writing the term host rock. So this host rock is a technical term. If somebody is asking you geology of chromium, and you are able to write host rock is ultramafic rock, right? And you are able to write name of any ultramafic, periodotite or dunite, right? Copper is formed with granite mostly, right? Especially porphyry copper, which Sir has written. So you are using the knowledge of igneous here also. So just remember थोड़ा सा concept और forming process आपको समझ में आएगा कि chromium अर्ली मैग्मेटिक है. अर्ली मैग्मा में सबसे पहले, मतलब अर्ली मैग्मा में वोवन रिएक्शन सीरीज से आप सोच लो कौन सा मिनरल बनता है, ओलिवीन, राइट? एंड व्हाट आर द रॉक्स व्हिच आर रिच इन ओलिवीन? अल्ट्रामैफिक रॉक्स लाइक ड्यूनाइट, पीरियोडोटाइट. सो इट इज ऑल इंटरलिंकिंग, इट इज ऑल अप्लाइड, राइट? तो बहुत इजी है. तो दो दो एस्पेक्ट हो गए. One aspect is we discuss about ore forming process of a mineral. Another one is host rock, right? And third thing is about stratigraphy, right? तो ये सब लोग नहीं कर पाएंगे सारी चीज में, इसलिए आई हैव शेयर्ड सम स्पेसिफिक थिंग कि अगर आपसे कॉपर लेड जिंक पूछा, तो यू नो कॉपर लेड जिंक इज मोस्टली फाउंड इन अरावलीज. तो अरावलीज की रट लो स्ट्रेटिग्राफी, राइट? एंड राइट स्ट्रेटिग्राफी. अगर आपसे कोल का पूछ रहे हैं, गोंडवाना की याद कर लो एंड जस्ट राइट गोंडवाना स्ट्रेटिग्राफी. तो इट इज थर्ड एस्पेक्ट ऑफ हिज जियोलॉजी, राइट? अगर आपसे वो पूछ रहे हैं समथिंग अबाउट, राइट, इस तरह आप रट लो. अब जैसे कि मैंगनीज है, राइट? आई एम जस्ट सेइंग इट हियर, हो सकता है परसों पेपर में आ जाए कि मैंगनीज कि आप याद नहीं कर पाओगे. इट इज बहुत बड़ी स्ट्रेटिग्राफी है जहाँ जहाँ मैंगनीज मिलता है. सेंट्रल इंडिया में बस्ता क्रेटॉन में मिलता है, राइट? बट एटलीस्ट रिमेंबर मंसर फॉर्मेशन, राइट? एमएनीज का, मैंगनीज का एमएन होता है, मंसर में भी एमएन आ रहा है, मंसर फॉर्मेशन याद कर लो. सो देयर इज अ सॉसर ग्रुप, उसमें मंसर फॉर्मेशन है, उसमें मैंगनीज मिलता है. यू आर एबल टू राइट, इतना सा भी लिख पाओगे ना आप स्ट्रेटिग्राफी के नाम पे एग्जाम में, दीज 5 वर्ड्स, that manganese is formed in Mansar formation of saucer group, right? आपको 3 नंबर एक्स्ट्रा मिलेगा आउट ऑफ 10, right? Because it is core geology, you are hitting at the core of the geology, right? So like what I said, structure के हिसाब से पहला और forming process, host rock और stratigraphy is possible, right? 3 चीज हो गई. चौथी चीज होगा इसका जियोग्राफी, जियोलॉजिकल डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, वेयर इट इज फॉर्म, इंडिया का मैप बना दो, राइट? एंड फिफ्थ थिंग, अगर इफ यू हैव सम डेटा अबाउट टनेज ग्रेड, लिख दो, अदरवाइज इट्स ओके. तो इतना भी आप लिख पाओगे ना इन 12 मिनरल में, यू विल गेट फुल मार्क्स. 10 में से आपको 8 तक मिलेगा, 9 तक मिलेगा, राइट? तो इसको भी इफ यू वांट मी टू प्रायोरिटाइज, आई वुड से कि कॉपर लेड जिंक तो याद कर लो. इट इज लाइक गोल्ड, पेट्रोल के अलावा कॉपर लेड जिंक इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, राइट? रिमेंबर दैट. उसके अलावा आई थिंक chromium is also like pretty very commonly asked, right? So chromium में don't go in detail of ore forming process, उसमें डायग्राम वगैरह बनाया हुआ है, थोड़ा सा कोर्स था. जस्ट रिमेंबर अल्ट्रामैफिक रॉक, जस्ट रिमेंबर सुकिंडा कॉपर, लाइक सुकिंडा क्रोमियम डिपॉजिट, इतने से 2 3 कीवर्ड्स, राइट? तो इसको आप थोड़ा सा वो कर सकते हो, प्रायोरिटाइज, दैट्स इट, राइट? और बाकी तो ठीक है. तो आई थिंक दिस इज इनफ इन इकोनॉमिक.
That this year that Singbum news was also there, na? Like world's oldest beach was in Singbum Craton. So around that, you remember, like Susukinda is now in Odisha. Okay, so early, you remember from early that it found early. So chromites from early, they're ultramafic, and they're found sort of like geographically also, sort of like in that area. Yes, so this is important. If they ask you uranium, okay, so just remember the keyword. First of all, they are found again near Singhbum shear zone. Okay, so remember this keyword and remember this Jadugoda mines.
Jadugoda mines, yes.
Okay, so if someone, let's say from bark or etc. is making paper, so they will tend to ask about uranium. They're like favorite of. So just remember this: they're found in Singhbum shear zone, and the name of the mines is Jadugoda mines.
Yes, This can give you 2 marks extra, right? Just these two keywords,
Yes,
right?
those are
Similarly,
important
gold,
keywords.
Kolar, KGF Kolar gold mines are very famous for gold, right? Coal, all Gondwana thing, and I think uh, manganese का मैंने बता दिया, Mansar formation of saucer group, right? Zinc, there is one like Zawar is for copper only, right? And lead zinc का है, तो ठीक है, इससे हो जाएगा.
कॉपर का इंडिया का बिगेस्ट ओपन कास्ट माइन इट डजंट इवन नो लाइक फ्रॉम जनरल स्टडीज पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू ओपन कास्ट माइन मलंज खंड डिपॉजिट.
Malaj Khand, yes. In fact, there
Yeah,
can,
so this one, and as Mayank sir said that like those Zawar where you get like I think lead and zinc is also there.
lead
So
zinc.
those
Okay, okay.
it will be there in your notes. Yeah.
हाँ, अब लाइक वी हैव डिस्कस दिस इन क्लास, आई होप आपने देख रखा होगा, लेकिन
Yes.
अगर आपसे पूछ लिया कि मलंजकन कॉपर डिपॉजिट पे नोट लिखो, राइट, एंड दिस कुड बी इवन बी अ कंपलसरी क्वेश्चन, तो क्या लिखोगे? जो कॉपर के लिए पढ़ रखा है वो लिख दो ना, कॉपर इज अ हाइड्रोथर्मल प्रोसेस, राइट? तो वो जो नॉर्मल चीजें, होस्ट रॉक लिखना है, और फॉर्मिंग प्रोसेस लिखना है, स्ट्रेटिग्राफी मलंजकंड की लिखना है, पता होना चाहिए मलंजकंड इज इन सेंट्रल इंडिया, तो बस्तर की अगर याद करिए तो लिख दो, 3 चीज हो गई. फोर्थ थिंग इज
Host rock मलंज खंड में you get granite. Host
ग्रेनाइट,
rock you have
हाँ,
already
तो
memorized.
होस्टॉइड आपने याद कर लिया, और फार्मिंग प्रोसेस इज हाइड्रोथर्मल, राइट? स्ट्रेटिग्राफी याद है तो ठीक है, नहीं है तो इट्स ओके. फिर उसके बाद इंडिया का मैप बना के मलंजखंड डिसाइड कर दो, एंड इसका कुछ स्पेसिफिक कंटेंट भी दे रखा है, तो इवन इन 20 to 50 वर्ड्स लिखोगे आप, एंड यू विल गेट अराउंड 50% मार्क्स इस क्वेश्चन में, डिफरेंशियल मार्किंग के कारण, ठीक है? वी कैन मूव टू
Okay,
माइनिंग.
now mining. Okay, mining is a very short topic. Okay, so one question will come from methods of prospecting of mining. So geological, you prepare one answer. Geophysical, geochemical, and geobotanical. Now, in geophysical that you study here, now it overlaps with hydrogeology. May there is a topic exploration for water. Okay, so there those geophysical methods are there. Okay, so gravity, seismic. Okay, so all that in your notes. So in geophysical, they will not usually ask you about right or not on geophysical. So geological, geochemical, geobotanical, they can ask. Another is very important topic is pathfinder or indicator elements. Okay, so sometimes what happens is gold is very rare. If you start looking for gold, you will never find it. But what happens is you find कि जैसे to find fire we can look for smoke. Smoke is much easier to locate. It will rise up. So these pathfinder indicator elements are like that only. So instead of directly looking for that mineral, you look for indicator element. Okay. So for example, if you are looking for gold, people don't go and start searching for gold. They search for arsenic. Okay. So arsenic is for gold. Okay, so these are indicators. So very important topic. This can be asked in the exam. Okay, so this is part of that geochemical. Similarly, in geobotanical, there are indicator plants. Okay, so maybe some plants they are absent in presence of certain mineral. Okay, it may act as a contaminant. Okay, it may be toxic to plants. Some plants they may grow only in the toxic environment. Okay, so or sometimes what happens is their morphology, size of leaves, stems, shape, etc. may be changed. So those that part will come over there. Okay, so these are very simple. Geophysical, gravity, magnetic. Okay, electromagnetic, seismic, that Schlumberger and Vernier configuration is there. So these basic questions they can ask in the exam. Actually, they're a little bit deeper, and it's the same thing that you have to write for these geophysical methods that you study here. The same thing you have to write in hydrogeology as well. Okay, so for example, if you write about resistivity method and you discuss Schlumberger and Venner configuration, it's the same in hydrogeology also. Okay, so you just at least write those techniques of sampling. Okay, so they can ask you directly about techniques of sampling, but as last year what they did was in IFoS, if you've seen, for example, methods of mining, techniques of sampling. So a 15 or 20 mark question they can split into ABCD. Okay, and then they can ask you what this is what they did last year. So write a note on this type of chip sampling, channel sampling. Okay, grab sampling is there. Basically notes are there, you just understand through this part. Okay, but this mining geology syllabus is very simple, direct. Okay, only thing is geophysical part is challenging, the rest is very simple. Estimation of ore reserve, numerical will come 90% of the times. Okay, in that numerical, all you have to do is take weighted average. Okay, you already know. So most of the times you have to take weighted average. If they ask you about tonnage, all you have to do is area into thickness. Average thickness will give you volume. Multiply it with density will give you tonnage of ore. Okay, so and then multiply it with grade. Okay, so it will tell you the metal content. So this is very simple volume mass formula which you have studied in basically even before 10th class that you have to apply. Okay, this is to calculate the tonnage and the metal content. If you are asked about average grade, then you have to take average, weighted average. Okay, so just you already know if weight is W, okay, value is V. So weighted average is summation WI VI over summation of weights only. So this weight could be thickness, this value could be grade. Okay. So very basic formula. So it could be like it is 5 meter thick of 15% grade. So 5 into 15. 3 meter thick of 20% grade, 3 into 20. And then in the denominator, it will be 5 plus 3. Okay. So that gives you average grade. So all that you have to do in here. Okay. Methods of exploration and mining metallic ores. So this one is basically the same as methods of prospecting only. Okay, so exploration that you'll go. Industrial minerals. Okay, so basically you have notes for this part. In geology, usually direct question comes. Sometimes as part of economic, they may ask you about fertilizer minerals in industrial minerals, cement, refractory, and ceramic. Okay, so if you want, but I think you can skip this part as well. It may come in the exam. I'm not saying it will not come. You can prepare direct answer for industrial minerals as well, which includes ferromanganese nodules. Okay, as well, cobalt crust and all those things also covered under. So sorry, that will be under marine mineral resources. Okay, so in industrial minerals, other could be clay minerals. Okay, so you can prepare a generic answer for this as well. Okay, or at least know what are the basic ingredients within these industries. Marine mineral resources, again, those will be, for example, ferromanganese nodules. Mineral methods of mining. So this part I forgot. Sorry. Methods of mining. Okay, so this is very important. They do ask this in the exam. Last year they asked, as I said, like as sub parts to a big question. So in here they will ask, for example, what are methods of mining means that room and pillar mining is there, cut and fill method is there. Okay. So in your course, I've shared those videos, animation videos as well. So just go through those. They are just 2 minutes videos only. It will help you visualize what is happening. Other than that, it is very simple. All you are doing is you are taking material out. So that is the whole thing. Basically in room and pillar that becomes a room, and then you're leaving some stuff behind. If you take everything out, then mine will collapse. Okay, so it has to keep standing somehow. So some part you leave behind, some part you take out. That is a basic concept. Okay, mineral beneficiation or dressing is, again, it is also important. So syllabus is very limited as said, like in mining. So in mineral beneficiation and or dressing, very simple concepts are there. Okay, so ore dressing, mineral beneficiation is concentrating ore within the, when you take it out of the mine. So some basic processes, first you crush it into very small pieces. So that is the part, and then you basically can apply certain techniques which you have studied in school as well. So for example, you have studied that magnetic separator is there, where you have magnets. Magnetic substances will fall on this side, non-magnetic will go there. There is another one which is electrostatic separator, which is based on principle of charge. So some of them will drop here, which are charged. If they are not charged, they can keep on carrying on and will drop there. So if they're charged versus non-charged. Okay. Similarly, another one is froth flotation is very important. So this is also like sort of like chemistry NCERT topic. You use palm oil, etc. There is bubbles, air is coming, and you just keep removing gang material. Okay, So these separation methods are important. So please go through these. This question can come in the exam. Okay. All right. So the last part is geochemistry and environment. Okay. Cosmic abundance. This they asked already in civil services. I don't think they will ask again. So in this you have to write about Odo Harkins effect. Hydrogen is most abundant. After that you have helium, and then you get that zigzag pattern in cosmic abundance. Okay. Uh, Composition of planets and meteorites. Meteorites, as I said, it is repeat from general geology. So composition of meteorites, what will be there? In composition, there is iron meteorite, stony meteorite, iron stony meteorites. So same over there. Planets, they will usually ask you about difference between Jovian and terrestrial planets. Okay. Composition of Earth distribution of elements, same as general geology. Okay, so here you should know the bulk composition, those pie charts. Okay, or at least in table form. So which is most abundant element. So at least top 4 or 5 you should know. Trace elements and crystal chemistry. Okay, so in trace elements, this European anomaly is important, and lanthonoid contraction. Okay, so they can ask you short questions on these parts. Types of chemical bonds. Okay, so this question can also be asked. Very simple. Okay, ionic, covalent, van der Waals bonds are there, metallic bonds are there. Okay, coordination number is very simple concept. If, for example, in NaCl you have Na as cation, so what are the surrounding atoms around that? So basically, how many atoms surround a given atom? That is coordination number. So here, coordination number and radius ratio rule. So we covered this in mineralogy also. Okay, so please, this can be asked. Definition of coordination number, radius ratio rule. If radius ratio is 1, basically ratio of, what is radius ratio? Radius ratio is, I think, ratio of cation by ratio of anion. Okay. So if it is 1, coordination number is 12. If it is 0.71 something, then range between that range coordination number will be 8, 6, 4, 2, like that. Okay. So please remember that part. Memorize that one. This is very simple. Isomorphism, polymorphism. Isomorphism is like solid solution only. So just go through this part. Elementary thermodynamics, first, second, third laws of thermodynamics part you have to go through. Okay. All right. So those you can go through PJ's notes. Yes, Mayank sir. In environment part, geochemistry.
In geochemistry, I think this polymorphism is important because it is also used in mineralogy, and it is also directly mentioned in geochemistry. So it is pretty much like meteorites. It can be asked in both the paper. And इसको पढ़ लो, example याद कर लो, दो तीन जो भी हैं diagrams का. And then there is sir has shared there are three mechanisms also. The short form is RDO. One is R is for replacive, D is for disorder, order disorder, and O is for something like that. एक बार देख लेना उसको. D is for displacive, O is for order disorder, R is for uh, replacement polymorphism, right? So it is about how
Rearrangement, I think.
rearrangement. Okay, okay. So it is about how bonds are basically changing, and it is leading to polymorphism. So it is bit technical, but इसमें आप example ही लिखना होता है, and you can get a lot of marks in this question, right? So prepare polymorphism well, and apart from that, right, moving to this environmental geology. See, environmental geology is something which each one of you can write, right, something. So you can use your GS ka knowledge in that. A lot of topics are linked with general studies only, right? Like the first topic is natural hazards. So you all prepared disaster management pretty well. So you can write all those points, and you can use your wisdom of geology, especially and geomorphology and structural geology, right? So to make it a geology oriented answer. So like in general geology, you have heard about, you have read about earthquakes, volcanoes. So you know what are the hazards related to earthquake, volcanoes, right? Landslides you have covered here as well as in engineering geology, right? So floods is there. We have shared notes also on floods. You prepare floods in great detail in general studies. You can use all that knowledge, right? There is not, ऐसा नहीं है कि जियोलॉजी में बहुत अलग लिखेंगे. More or less same है. In geology, you can use some technical jargon from geomorphology, right? About channels, bats, all these words, right? So, but hai more or less same hai. This is another thing is coastal erosion, right? So they have specifically mentioned coastal erosion. So coastal erosion, इसलिए coastal landforms become important, especially erosional coastal landforms, right? So there you can link them here, right? The processes you read in geomorphology, right? You can use them here. So, like in natural hazards, the most important I think is coastal erosion, right? This is one. Then in the second, this environmental impact, right? Environmental impact of ABCD, right? There is urbanization, open cast mining, industrialization, all these things. So you can you are all better prepared with environmental impact. So you can write you can bifurcate the environment into hydrosphere, lithosphere, atmosphere, right? Impact on water, land, air, and then on wildlife, right? Ecosystem, on humans, all these things you can write very good answers. But if you have to prepare two or three topics in environmental geology for geology purpose, they are the first most important topic is radioactive disposal of radioactive waste, right? It is directly mentioned also, radioactive waste disposal. So just stratify this will be asked during your exam. If they don't ask radioactive waste disposal, they will ask something on dumping of mine, right? So then there is a concept of acid mine drainage. So these two are a bit technical, these two are more geology oriented. That is why they keep asking this. So they can ask on acid mine drainage, AMD, right? So then there are certain that they are associated with pyrites and all these things. So this radioactive waste disposal and AMD, acid mine drainage, these two are important, right? In acid mine drainage there are some technical keywords. There is yellow boy, right? Some right, and then something like that, some derivative of pyrite and some basic chemical reaction. When it comes in contact with water, it produces sulfuric acid, and then the water becomes acidic. So we said that acid is draining from mine, acid mine drainage, something like that. So these two are the most important topic. And then the next one is simple, the pollution of groundwater, surface water, right? So यहाँ पे apart from these two topics, acid mine drainage and radioactive waste disposal, the third topic, important topic, will come from this pollution of groundwater, right? So or surface water. So here they will ask some specific pollutant, right? Arsenic contamination of groundwater. A lot of geology is related to them, right? And then there is fluoride also, especially in Haryana, in this region, there is a lot of fluoride contamination. So arsenic is very common because arsenic has a geogenic origin, right? So coal, a lot of arsenic get leached from coal beds, from mica deposits, right? So this is geology. So all this is shared in the slides in the notes. You prepare this. So right, and then the last one is about this environment protection legislative measures in India. So you all know the environmental laws, right? So they will this seldom ask this in geology, but if they ask, you can write that from your general studies knowledge, right? So prepare radioactive waste disposal, acid mine drainage, and contamination of water, especially fluoride contamination and arsenic contamination, right? This year in uranium contamination was also in news. So if you are able to understand arsenic contamination, you will be able to write uranium contamination also, right? So ultimately nothing happened. These all arsenic and this uranium, these are naturally present in groundwater. These are naturally present in the rocks where water is present, right? So whenever there is increase in water or there is decrease in the water level, what happens? These rocks get exposed to air, right? Earlier they were fully saturated, now they get exposed to air, and this uranium it reacts somehow with oxygen and some uranium complex, right? And when the groundwater again recharges, this complex get dissolved in water, and water get uh, contaminated. Simple. Even if you are able to draw this diagram in uranium contamination, and this is all part of gender studies also, you must have read in current affairs, right? So these are 4 5 topics which you can prepare well in environmental geology. So I think we are done with this listing of important topics, right?
Yeah. So here it became more like a discussion. So list Mayank sir because has already shared with you in the group. So just keep that in mind. And here it was like more of like a discussion, kind of like revising it just from the syllabus point of view. Okay. So any questions?
So can you guide for science for the GK paper? Matlab like I've done basic biology, the biotech chapter from NCRTs and the science which I did for the CSC mains. Anything else do we need to do? Because sometimes they ask like core bio questions.
Hmm. Like okay, like there is not much you can do actually. What you can do is you
Hmm.
can revise what you have read science and tech current affair wala portion in your civil services, if you have given civil services means, right? So see, if you will
Hmm.
analyze the question, see the success for scoring more in GK paper is question number 1 to 4, right? Generally we tend to focus a lot on 5 and 6. So 1 to 4 are very static, right? They will ask about basic history, basic polity, right? Current affair wala, economics and geography also. So write that very well, right? In question number 5, I think I have plotted that as environment come agriculture come science, right? And in sixth, they ask hardcore science or hardcore science of some technology, right? Like in sixth, they will ask you differentiate between how quantum computing and normal computing differ, right? Last year they asked about Bose Einstein condensate, right? In one of the year they asked about science, right? They asked some Mendeleev experiment. Like why do Mendeleev choose that that P only garden P experiment, right? So like I was not aware, but a lot of people say that it was present in 8th or 9th or 10th ka NCRT or something like that. A lot of people in anthropology and agriculture, they study it well, right? So they ask actually this like they even ask polymer. What do you mean by polymer, right? Something like that. So see, you cannot prepare polymer. You know polymer, right? You have been using polymer, polythene, a lot of things daily. So you have to dig into your past knowledge, your school knowledge, your knowledge, and generate content on it, right? In 5 or 6, what you can do is like you can enlist, if you have time, you can enlist 10, 15 important technology coming up, upcoming technology like solid state drives are coming today, right? So you prepare some science of solid state hard drive, right? They can be asked. They are last year, like they are asking science of quantum computing, qubits, and all these things. So this you don't prepare, but at least prepare some basic science. So you can prepare the definition, you can prepare some diagram of it, right? So this is what you can do for science and tech, and just do current affair uska wala part. Baki it is all about your tempo in the exam. When you don't attempt this question number 5 and 6 at the starting, attempt it in the mid or maybe in the end, maybe mostly in mid. So at that time you are most innovative, you can write something on it, right? So that is what you do. Also in our English supportive content course, I have uploaded three things. I have uploaded PT 3 means 365 का highlight करके कुछ कुछ लिखा हुआ है. But it was when I was preparing, it was 2017-18 वाला. तो अगर आपके पास खुद के पास नहीं है means 365 का, आप उसको यूज कर लो. Yesterday I have uploaded another PDF. वो थोड़ा सा बड़ा है, 170 पेज का है. बट उसमें व्हाट आई हैव डन इज आई हैव एनलिस्टेड लास्ट ईयर तक 2019 तक का इंपॉर्टेंट टेक वाले टॉपिक्स. 5G 4G इनका डिफरेंस क्या है, और जो भी सुपर कंडक्टर क्या होता है, पॉलीमर्स क्या होते हैं, ये चीज. तो यू कैन रेफर दैट पीडीएफ और उससे थोड़ा थोड़ा ब्रशअप कर लो. डोंट हैव टू गो रीड वर्ड बाय वर्ड, बट कुछ कुछ यू कैन माइंड आउट समथिंग और कुछ फंस जाता है, तो दैट यू कैन प्रिपेयर. अदरवाइज इट्स ऑल अबाउट बिलीफ, और जो आपने आज तक प्रिपेयर किया है उसको अप्लाई करना है उस क्वेश्चन में, राइट? और वो सबके साथ डिफिकल्ट होगा, सब कोई भी प्रिपेयर नहीं होता उन क्वेश्चंस के लिए, राइट?
Thank you, sir.
So I think we can end this here, right? All the very best to
Yes.
everyone.
Yes, all the very best. And
Thank you, sir.
yeah, it's also important to uh, take rest. Okay, so a few days are left. So when you're studying, study very efficiently. Okay, but nowadays what will happen is try to sleep also, because otherwise before exam you will not get sleep.
Hmm.
Okay, so tension will be there, and then because you need that energy also during the exam. So you should start like making that, if for example you have a habit of like sleeping very late and waking up very late, so then your so rhythm is like with that waking up like at 11 a.m. If I'm not saying you're doing that, but if some of you are doing that. So because if in the exam you have to wake up early that day, maybe you have to go to center. So try to get into that habit from now only. Okay.
And one more last key in practically, like it is actually very stressful for IFS means. Time इतना कम है, इतना प्रिपेयर किया है, इतना याद किया है, right? So exam days are very intensive. तो एग्जाम के बीच का जो टाइम होता है 2 आवर का, यूज इट वेरी वाइसली, राइट? इन पेपर 2 यू कैन रीड अ लॉट इन दोस 2 आवर्स, इन 12 से 2 बजे के बीच में. यूज दैट टाइम वेरी वाइसली. और स्ट्रेसफुल होता है, बहुत ज्यादा होता है. यूज whatever तरीके यू कैन यूज. You use Red Bull. A lot of people used to drink Red Bull before the exam, all these things. But those 2 days will be very intensive, 3rd of March and 5th of March. So like be ready for that and keep studying till the end, right? Even if you are someone जो एग्जाम के एक हफ्ते पहले, 4 दिन पहले छोड़ देता है, it that won't work in forest. इसमें आखिरी समय तक पढ़ना है आपको, right? 8 a.m. तक पढ़ना है if you have a paper at 9, right? So just do that. Keep revising. अभी लग रहा होगा ये याद नहीं, वो याद नहीं, पढ़ सब लग रखा है. That is normal. वो सबको वैसे ही फील हो रहा होगा, बट जस्ट कीप डूइंग, कीप गोइंग टिल द एंड, है ना, गिव योर बेस्ट, बस इतना ही, राइट? So we can, I think, Lawrence sir, if we can end the session here, and we'll upload it on the portal also.